Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA Karen stories. Imagine owning a lake cabin for generations, minding your own business, when suddenly an HOA Karen starts demanding you pay thousands in dues for land that is not even hers. She called the cops on me, threatened lawsuits, and harassed me for weeks. But what she did not know about my property was about to flip her entire world upside down. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled HOA Karen called the cops on me for refusing to join the HOA, unaware I own a part of her neighborhood. So I've got a little lakefront cabin that's been in my family for generations. My grandpa built it long before there was even talk of a subdivision, let alone some power-hungry HOA. It is nothing really fancy, just a wooden place with a wraparound porch and a dock that reaches out over the water, but to me it is home. I spent my summers there fishing with my dad and later bringing my own friends out to swim, grill, and sit by the fire pit. I remember one summer when I was about 10, my cousin tried to paddle the canoe by himself and ended up flipping it completely, sending all of us into the water, laughing and soaked from head to toe. Moments like that are why I've never wanted to sell it. It is more than a cabin, it's a collection of memories, a little refuge built on the hard work and love of generations. The thing is, my cabin predates the neighborhood HOA by about 25 years. When the developers bought up the surrounding land, they built rows of cookie-cutter houses paved over the woods and set up an HOA to enforce their little standards. My place sat on the edge of it all, a little slice of independence grandfathered in. I always liked it that way. I paid my property taxes, kept my land tidy, and minded my own business. For a long time, I did not even interact much with the people in the subdivision. A few of them were friendly enough, waving as they drove past, and some even came over to fish or launch their boats from the lake. I did not mind sharing as long as folks were respectful. I had no reason to think that there would ever be an issue. What I didn't know is that my grandfather never mentioned was that our property lines extended further than I even realized. Not only did I own the cabin, dock and front lawn, but I also owned a narrow strip of land that included part of the subdivision's main access road and, more importantly, the boat launch that the HOA members love to use. It was one of those quirks of old surveys that no one bothered to question until the wrong person came along. And that wrong person was none other than Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, and Karen did not waste any time. The first I heard from her, she was standing at the edge of my property, arms crossed, glaring like she owned the entire lake, clipboard in hand. I was not even sure she knew exactly where my property lines ended, but she seemed confident, which is usually dangerous. Karen, you need to join the HOA. It is mandatory for everyone in the neighborhood. Me, I'm outside the HOA boundaries and I've got the property survey to even prove it. But Karen did not even blink. She waved her clipboard around like it was the gospel. The board says that you need to pay thousands in back dues. You're gonna be fined if you don't join. I laughed, not at her personally, but at the absurdity. I've owned this land longer than she's even been alive, and suddenly I'm being told to bend over to some organization that does not even have jurisdiction over me? It was ridiculous. I tried to explain calmly, again showing her the survey and the property deed, but she didn't even care. She went on and on about community standards, fairness, and everyone has to contribute. Her tone was so aggressive you would think she was personally funding the HOA's budget out of her own pocket. Over the next few weeks, Karen escalated. She started filing fake police reports claiming I was trespassing on HOA property, sent me threats of lawsuits for not paying fees, and even started a small social media campaign trying to paint me as the problem neighbor. She shared photos of my cabin, twisted facts about the land, and even tagged other residents to rally them against me. Each post was more ridiculous than the last one, but I could see the tiny panic forming among neighbors who had not realized that I was not under HOA rules. The police came by a couple of times, each visit more absurd than the last one, with Karen loudly claiming I was harassing her and HOA members, while I calmly handed over my deeds, explaining everything. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. I quickly realized that Karen was not gonna back off. She assumed that her position on the board gave her authority over anyone nearby, and she didn't care to check facts before acting. Her obsession with making me pay dues and forcing me to join had become personal, and I knew if I didn't take control, she was gonna keep harassing me. Little did she know she was poking the wrong person, and my property held a secret that she had no clue about. A secret that would soon turn the entire neighborhood upside down. After dealing with weeks of Karen's harassment, I finally had a quiet evening going through the old deeds and surveys my grandfather had kept. I'd always known that my property predated the HOA, but I never realized just how much of the neighborhood I actually owned. As I carefully reviewed the maps, my eyes widened. The strip of land leading to the lake, the small dock area, and part of the main road used by most residents were all technically part of my property. No HOA boundaries applied here, no rules, no do's, no nothing. It was a perfect storm and I'd been sitting on it without even knowing. I could almost hear my grandfather chuckling from somewhere, knowing how cleverly he had secured this little patch of independence decades ago. I measured distances, checked legal descriptions, and even pulled out some old tax records. Every document confirmed the same thing: the HOA had been blind to a key piece of land, a strip that controlled access to the lake and the main road that funneled traffic to 60% of the homes in the neighborhood. And suddenly, Karen's constant demands, fake police calls, and social media campaigns seemed almost comical. She had no idea that she had been threatening someone who actually held a critical part of the neighborhood in their hands. Every complaint, every threat, every attempt to bully me into paying dues or joining the HOA had been completely misdirected. I had the upper hand, and it was a massive one. I spent the next few days quietly preparing. I contacted the real estate attorney who specialized in property disputes and easements, showing them the full extent of my ownership. We discussed options, but the strategy was clear. I would assert my rights and make sure Karen and the HOA understood exactly who controlled the access points they were constantly trying to boss around. For the first time in weeks, I actually felt calm. While Karen was busy plotting her next move, I had discovered the leverage that would finally end her reign of harassment. Soon the entire neighborhood would see that she had underestimated me and that her authority had limits she had never imagined. With my attorney's guidance, I began the process of asserting control over the strip of land and the boat launch. I was not looking to make enemies beyond Karen, but I needed her to understand that this was my property and she had no authority here. The first thing I did was I installed a simple gate across the narrow access road that cut through my land, making sure it was functional and clearly marked as private property. Signs went up indicating that the dock and road beyond were privately owned and access was by permission only. The next morning I was almost amused to see Karen arrive with her clipboard and phone in hand, looking ready to unleash her usual fury. She pulled up, slammed the car door, and started yelling before she even got out. Karen, what is this? You cannot do this. This is HOA property and you need to move that gate immediately. Me, actually Karen, this is my property. I own this land, including the road and the boat launch. I'd appreciate it if you and your guests respected it. Her face turned red. She fumbled for her phone, clearly trying to call someone or document the situation. It quickly became obvious to her and to any onlookers that the gate was not an arbitrary blockade, it was a legal assertion of ownership. Residents who regularly used the road started arriving, confused at the sudden restriction. Many of them realized they had been unknowingly crossing my land all this time. Some tried to negotiate access, but I calmly explained that the road and launch were private and access had to be arranged. The frustration was palpable. People couldn't reach the lake anymore without taking a long detour. Boat owners had to figure out new loading points, and the HOA's sense of control evaporated in an instant. Karen tried to argue, insist, and shout, but the evidence was irrefutable. I had the deeds, the surveys, and my attorney on call to clarify any disputes. Within hours, the tide had shifted completely. Karen's threats of lawsuits and fines fell flat. The members she had been leading were forced to acknowledge the limits of her power. By the afternoon, Karen was calling the HOA in a panic, demanding explanations and trying to regain control, but it was already too late. The reality of my ownership was undeniable, and the neighborhood was already adjusting to the sudden logistical changes. Karen had overstepped, and the consequences were immediate and unmistakable. By the next morning, the consequences of Karen's overreach were in full swing. Residents began calling each other, frustrated and confused about how they were supposed to get to the lake or use the boat launch. The detours added extra miles for almost everyone, and the inconvenience quickly became the main topic of conversation in the neighborhood. It was not long before the HOA's email threads were full of complaints and questions, most of them directed squarely at Karen. Karen predictably tried to maintain her usual bravado. She sent frantic messages demanding that the gate be removed and threatened anyone who interfered with the HOA property. But by now, her words carried very little weight. People then started asking for proof, legal documentation and records of ownership, and that is when Karen realized she was way out of her depth. Her authority was meaningless against an actual property deed and a legal survey. I stayed calm and let her flail. Meanwhile, I made myself available to any neighbors who needed clarification or guidance. And yeah, I was not being vindictive towards them. I simply explained the reality of the land boundaries and reassured them that the lake and the road were still accessible, but only through proper permission. Some residents, previously loyal to Karen, were visibly embarrassed that they had blindly followed her instructions or threats, and the backlash against her escalated quickly. Within days, the HOA board had a full-blown crisis on its hands. HOA members were furious, demanding accountability and questioning how Karen had managed to create such chaos. A vote of no confidence was swiftly organized, and Karen tried to argue, insist, and defend her actions, but the neighborhood had seen the evidence for themselves already. She had acted without authority, harassed a legitimate property owner, and caused widespread disruption. Ultimately, Karen was removed as HOA president. She was left to face the embarrassment of her actions while the rest of the HOA scrambled to repair relationships and regain access through proper channels. I didn't gloat to the community, but I did ensure that my ownership and control were clear. Karen's downfall was complete, her influence evaporated and her threats carried no more weight, and she became the cautionary example of what happens when someone oversteps. With the HOA reeling and Karen out of power, I finally negotiated a formal easement agreement that allowed limited documented access to the lake and roads for residents, ensuring my independence while maintaining neighborly cooperation. I had come out on top, vindicated and in full control of my property without anyone able to interfere again. And yeah guys, if you still enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and click the hype button if you want to support me. Thank you so much, and the next one is a super satisfying malicious compliance story that is titled "Someone had to pay me hush money, so I didn't call the cops." So when I lived at home 30 years ago, a friend of mine stole my credit card, used it and returned it. This was the days before smartphones, etc., and I was shocked when I got the bill. An older friend kept his ear to the streets and someone slipped up talking about their new car amp and scanner. I honed in on them suddenly. They didn't want to hang out anymore. I called the managers of the stores and they agreed to fax me the CC receipts. When the CC receipts came in, I noticed the first dimwit actually signed with his name. I own them, proof of the crime. The CC companies were lax, police did not care and would not even take a report, so now I can do what I want. I phoned the dude, recorded it and made him an offer that he couldn't refuse. If he refused, I would tell everyone that you and so are thieves and the next place I was going was your job and your name will be in the local paper. My demands were simple: give me the items back, which I returned for credit, and pay me $1,000 cash and I won't call the cops, and from here on out pretend like you don't know me. He took the offer, and it worked. I still told everyone, don't invite Rick and Carl into your house, they are thieves. The reason I told this story was I saw another video about someone flattening car tires on video because someone parked next to them and didn't like. Rich dad bailed his kid out. So sure, you could get them in court, but why not shake them down for some hush money to keep their rear out of jail or having a record? If you hold all the cards, don't sign an NDA in exchange for the money. Edit, my buddy John is the real hero in all of this, by the way. An older dude, W common sense, he was the OG sleuth. When an older dude speaks, you listen. Wish his GF/wife didn't hate me, but I have not seen him in years. We used to blast our car stereos and detail our cars every Saturday during the summer. And the next one is another super satisfying story titled "Access Removed, Here's All My Work." So I work in a role where I own a portion of the software. I don't work in IT, but I do system configuration for the portion I manage. I had admin access until one day IT removed it without warning and without notice. They claimed risk and board decisions. Of course, I could rampage and get my access back because it saves the company a significant amount of money each year, as we don't need to use external contractors. There's also no one else in the company that knows my part of the system or how to create business rules, scripting, coding for this particular system. While people know JavaScript, they would need to become familiar with the system, which will take time. Instead, fine. Sends a list of all all the things they now need to take over, so the work still gets done. Noted there can be no delays in turnaround time, despite there being an extra step. Noted that I would still need to approve every change in configuration. The list totaled to approximately 30 hours per week. It also requires 6 AM starts at points through the month. I made sure to also confirm that they would be required to come with me for all meetings regarding the system or data, because I won't be repeating myself or duplicating my effort. Within 30 minutes, the decision was reversed and I had my access back. I don't think I'll be changing back anytime soon. Not when we work under separate budgets and their team always cries time and cost poor. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I, male 33, am a single child, while my wife, 28, female, is the middle child between 3 sisters. My sister-in-law number 1, 32, and sister-in-law number 2, 25 years old. For context, SIL means sister-in-law. As much as I love my wife, I cannot deny that she has a crappy family. Her parents are mostly gone away for business meetings, and her eldest sister, my sister-in-law number 1, is an addict and acts like she is the youngest. The actual youngest sister, my sister-in-law number 2, is still okay. She is impatient and stubborn, but she respects my wife and genuinely loves her. The same cannot be said about sister-in-law 1. When my wife first brought me home to meet her parents, my SIL1 was also there. While my conversation with her parents was fine, I could see my SIL1 judging me. I later got to know that after I had left, she complained to my wife how I looked like I was dating her to leech off her, in response to which my wife told her that I in fact come from a rich old money kind of family. And just like that, my SIL1's opinion of me changed. Next time I came over, she was all smiles and showed me pictures of dresses she wanted to wear for my wedding. I knew what she was hinting at, but decided to play dumb. She started to dislike me, but was never outwardly rude, maybe because she knew hating me will ruin her relationship with my wife, who was my SIL1's last resort for financial help after my parents-in-law cut off ties with her. So anyway, my wife and I have been married for 2 years when my SIL1 announced she was getting married. Immediately after breaking the news, my sister-in-law started asking my wife for funds to pay for her wedding and honeymoon. Not only was the request huge, but we had also recently bought a condo which had costed us a lot, so naturally my wife refused. This didn't go well with my spoiled sister-in-law. I came home to find her screaming at my wife in our own apartment, saying vile and disgusting things. My wife was tearing up silently and I lost it. I dragged my sister-in-law 1 out of the house and slammed the door on her face before going to my wife. It took me 2 hours to calm her down and convince her that she was not in the wrong. The next morning we woke up to banging on our door. I told my wife to stay inside as I went out to find my sister-in-law standing there with another man. Apparently he was her fiancé, which shocked me because he looked so young. My sister-in-law started pushing at the door, demanding to be let inside and talk to the two-faced witch. When I refused, she started shouting that I cannot stop her from meeting her own sister. I eventually slammed the door shut again. 1 week later, my wife gets the message that my sister-in-law wants to apologize. We decided to meet at a cafe and I called up my sister-in-law number 2, who we had told about all of this, so my wife should not feel cornered. The 3 of us arrived first, while my sister-in-law arrived almost an hour late, and she made a face as soon as she saw the youngest sister. I did not even bother ordering something, but of course my sister-in-law ordered the most expensive drink. She then started by saying how sorry she was for being a bad sister and how my wife must hate her. She was essentially guilt-tripping my wife, saying how she was trying to change for the better, but she needed help because wedding and honeymoon were so expensive. When my sister-in-law number 2 pointed out that if they are that expensive, they can do away with them. My sister-in-law once said that it has been her childhood dream to have a grand wedding. My wife again refused, saying she did have enough funds. My sister-in-law looked at me and said that she could take my money because my money was my wife's money. My wife then explained to her that we had spent a lot in a condo recently and neither of us had funds. I thought maybe this would make her sister understand, but nope. Oh, that's wonderful. You can give that condo to me as a gift. You won't have to pay for my wedding then, only chip in for the honeymoon costs. Yep, she actually said that. We were both dumbfounded at her words as she kept on saying how much she needed a larger space for her and her boyfriend and how she had always dreamt of living in a condo. Seeing us so quiet, my sister-in-law too decided to interrupt. Yeah, they should hand over their house and savings to you so you can marry your barely not a minor boyfriend, smarty. That statement made me curious, but it was not the right time. As my both sister-in-laws started fighting verbally, my wife suddenly stood up. I've never seen her so furious and determined, and it made me proud to see her taking a stand. I've heard enough from you. I should have cut off when you came at our apartment that day, but I thought maybe you were just upset or something. Me and my husband will not be paying for you or handing you over anything. The most I can do is attend your wedding and wish you a happy life, but if you don't want, that's fine as well. Now please excuse us. We left quickly after that and spent the remaining day in bed together with our phones silenced. Over the following weeks, my sister-in-law number 1 grew increasingly pushy and began to bombard us with messages demanding that we hand over our condo, insisting that she deserved it more than we did. When we continued to refuse, she began visiting my wife's workplace, making a public show of crying and begging, painting my wife as the cruel sister. I suggested a restraining order, but my wife wanted to wait for that, still hoping that her sister would stop. One day at work, I received a message from my wife that my sister-in-law was visiting, asking me not to worry. Despite that, I ended my work early and rushed home, but my sister-in-law was gone by then. Apparently, my sister-in-law had invited us to her wedding and even left us a card. But over the course of a few days, we kept getting messages that the wedding date was postponed until my sister-in-law said that they would not be having a wedding, just signing the documents. We both thought that maybe this was all turning out for the better and things would change until one day, after 2 weeks of receiving the card, my wife noticed something strange. Her wedding ring was starting to get rusted when it was made out of pure gold. She panicked and we went to the shop we bought it from, only to be told that the ring was a replica and not the real thing. My wife was devastated, thinking she has misplaced her ring, while I was furious because I knew who had done this. We immediately filed a case with the police and I gave them my sister-in-law's address as a suspect. Both because I wanted to make it clear to her that she could not mess with my wife without consequences, and also because I knew my sister-in-law was growing 14 cannabis plants in her house. The next day we were called in to meet my sister-in-law, who was screaming how she needed the ring more than my wife for her wedding. We were handed the diamond ring back and were informed that on top of theft, they found cannabis in her house, expected, and the boy she was sharing her joints with was 17. Disturbing. When the police had arrived, they were both really high. My wife was shocked at all of this and I decided to take her back home. We didn't get to know how long my sister-in-law was supposed to be in, but she did try to fight her case by selling her apartment, but ended up losing it and was then fined for even more. She also tried to reach out to her parents, demanding her share in the property, but instead got a restraining order. It's been quite a few years since all this chaos and we haven't heard anything from her. I hope we never do, because she was nothing but a burden for my wife and an annoyance for me. And before we end the video, let's read another amazing petty revenge story, and this one is titled "You Get What You Give." Reading someone else's post reminded me of when I was a bartender in my 20s. It was a dance bar and there was this one regular who would always just sort of toss his money at me, always bills, and he would never tip. And frequently he would then turn around and park his ass directly in front of the bar so other customers could not get to me. I felt like George Costanza yelling, "We're living in a society here." Well, one day I'd had it. I was in a cranky mood and we'd been getting slammed when he comes along, orders the usual, and then tossed his money at me like I'm supposed to chase it. So I pulled out his change and whipped it down towards the counter, so all the coins bounced up and flew in multiple directions. He had to scramble to pick it up amidst the flying feet on the dance floor. He stopped coming to my side of the bar after that. Respect service people. They are in between you and the thing you want. Oh, and more importantly, they are human beings. And then a user in the comments said, "I got fired from my job at a club when I was a student. There was this dickhead regular who used to whistle at you like a dog, decided to throw the money at me. My gut reaction was to throw the drink over him in return. It was worth it." And yeah guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to subscribe and check out my playlist on the left, and I will see you again tomorrow.